somewhere down there is the very beautiful and very windswept Scottish island of Mull. We've been invited here by Bev and Hilda, who think they may have discovered the remains of a long-lost chapel and burial ground. They stumbled across the remains deep in a forest, and if they're right, they may have found a community that was wiped from the map over 150 years ago. So me, my friend here, and a motley bunch of archaeologists who are travelling by sea are about to embark on a journey to find what could be the earliest days of Christianity in Britain. Or are we just on a flight of fancy? The island of Mull lies just off the western coast of Scotland. So we've had to travel by air, sea, and in Professor Mick Aston's case, some sort of self-propelled wheelbarrow to visit a remote promontory at Ballisgate, a few miles from the main town of Tobermory. And all this effort is because of these earthworks, located by two amateur volunteers. They met on Mull, having moved from England with their families, and joined a local archaeology project, where they promptly stumbled across something really special. Look at this from the Glasgow Herald. Meet the amateur sleuths who stumbled upon one of Scotland's earliest communities. And there's Hilda and Bev and some obscure lump. And here's Hilda, Bev and Professor Mick Aston. See what it goes on to say? Can we expect Bev and Hilda's chapel to feature on Time Team in the future? It really does say that. But the answer is, realistically, it's probably not going to be excavated. It's wrong, the paper's wrong.
Yeah, we're pleased.
How did you find the place?
We volunteered to Scotland's Rural Past.
Which is what?
They're recording relics, ruins that haven't actually got recording at the moment. We got provided with some aerial photography by themselves for this area, and we were looking for shadows on the aerial photography and just wandering around to see what we could match up. And we're starting to get very excited about the lumps and bumps over here.
When did you decide it was a chapel?
It was after the surveyors had done this map. It looked like chapels they'd had proof of in the past, where they found relics, they found crosses, and they could say, yes, these are chapel sites. It fits the bill, shape and size-wise.
Mick, if they're right, and it genuinely is a previously undiscovered chapel, how significant is that?
I think that would be really significant, because there are a lot of these sites in the Western Isles, but to find a new one that hasn't been noticed before and to be able to actually look at it, do some excavation on it, that's fantastic.
What would you like us to find?
I want you to find the floor, which is a very strange request, but I've been sort of digging around what I believe is a door jamb, and I can't actually get to the bottom of that stone, and hopefully there might be something on that floor.
How about you? Have you got any special requests?
I'd like you to excavate this area in case there are graves or bones.
At first glance, this earthworks survey does seem to show a raised platform with a small east-west building, an evidence of some sort of exterior altar or shrine. For Mick, this is a classic layout for a 6th or 7th century chapel. But then again, it could just be a small stone-built shepherd's hut or barn.
And then we've got to work out what we're going to do with all this shamazzle.
Unfortunately, geophys won't be able to help us define this piece of archaeology, as it's a mass of stony rubble covering stone walls, which in turn sit on top of a rocky outcrop, or a whole lot of messy noise, as it's known in the geophys world.
See, there's method in this madness. There's absolute method in this madness.
We're just going to have to unpick it all by hand.
All right, Phil, where do you want us?
I mean, we'll just run it over the bank and come up to the edge of the church, chapel or whatever it is.
But John and his team should be able to survey the rest of this plateau, including this mysterious square enclosure that Mick suspects may be a later cemetery. In the meantime, we're concentrating on the east end of the possible chapel, where there could be an altar and even evidence of ritual devotion.
If we get any finds at all, I think we ought to be wary of what they are because that'll tell us what this thing is, and I think probably in particular quartzite pebbles. Oh, that's soft.
If Mick's right, this building could date as early as the 6th or 7th century.
That looks almost as battered as mine, but not quite as disgusting.
And that's an incredibly important date. It's when the nearby island of Iona and its famous monastery under St Columba was beginning to spread Christianity throughout northern Britain.
So this early Christian world that's centred on Iona, Mull's quite a central place.
Very much so, yes. If you think of Iona as being the centre of a spider's web, and the tentacles of this web extend right through Scotland, they extend down to Lindisfarne in northeast England, they extend into southwest France and into the Mediterranean, because the monastery is a major consumer of trade goods. I mean, looking at us, in front of us here, we have the Sound of Mull, which was one of the main trading routes during that period.
So our chapel, if it is a chapel, could that have been founded in the 6th century as well?
It certainly could have been, yes. The problem is that we don't have any historical evidence relating to it, so it's only the archaeology that will tell us exactly how old it is.
And excavation is what we're good at, especially if the archaeology behaves itself. And as you can see, we're already filming about 15 archaeologists digging what we think is the chapel. I'm standing about here. They're digging what would be the east end, which Mick says is really important because it would tell us whether or not we have got a chapel or not. But down here is the mysterious square-looking building, which, Mick, you said you weren't even going to start on yet, and yet you're already poking away at it.
Yeah, because in order to do any work here, we've got to unpick the stone mound. And already Derek's drawn my attention to this one, look.
We have this stone here, Tony, which looks to me like a piece of sculpted stone, possibly ecclesiastical.
But come round here, look, because there's also this on the corner, look, which is a saddle quern stone for grinding grain. And, of course, the interesting thing about that is it ought to be prehistoric in date.
Prehistoric?
Yeah.
Well, that's a surprise, isn't it? Looks like we're going to be quite busy today.
Join a thriving worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world, with more digs and greater access than ever before.
Welcome back to the Scottish island of Mull, where towards the end of last year, two local people, Bev and Hilda, discovered this intriguing earthwork here in the forest. Of course, when they found it, they think it might be a chapel, by the way. It was all covered over with trees like this. You didn't have this magnificent view that you've got here, which shows us the relationship there would have been between the chapel, if that's what it was, and the seascape over there. This has all been cleared away by the Forestry Commission Scotland. It's a standard procedure just so that there's room amongst the timber. But now that we're about to excavate down there where Mick thinks there might be some kind of cemetery, as you can see, it's pretty gloomy round there. We need the trees trimmed a bit, what they call brashing. Spot a brashing, lads? So after a bit of heavy-duty pruning, Trench 2 goes in over this striking square feature which Mick thinks may be a graveyard. But as we've already found a prehistoric grinding stone here, it may not be that straightforward.
There's Derek. Derek, come and look at this.
And the first dating evidence for the possible 7th century chapel isn't looking too good either.
Yep, that's definitely pottery.
How old?
Well, now you're asking, you see.
An expert would be able to tell.
Phil, there's another bit there. Just come up.
A little bit. So what date's that then?
On the face of it, 14th, 15th century?
This is not what we'd expect from a chapel site, is it?
No.
But within minutes, the next piece of dating evidence looks much better.
It looks like a little Jersey Royal covered in mud, but if you give it a good clean, you
can see it's a quartz pebble.
Now, why did you make a noise like a pirate?
Because you get quartz pebbles, white quartz pebbles, on chapel sites in the early medieval period in Ireland and Western Scotland. It's typical.
I've heard this before, but there's part of me that's very sceptical about this. Why couldn't it just be an old pebble?
Because it's not native to the site. Somebody's had to select it and bring it up here. And they seem to do that and put them on altars and saints' tombs, burials, that sort of thing.
This small pebble could be a clincher for the chapel argument. Unless, of course...
Not one, but two pieces of domestic pot.
Which would actually suggest we're digging a medieval house.
Hang on.
Well...
Unless, of course...
I give you another quartz pebble.
Oh, what? But hang on, I've got another piece of pot.
Faye, what have you got in your bit of to the trench?
I've got another pebble.
And I've got another piece of pot.
4-3. 4-3. What a match!
And so it goes on.
Another quartz pebble.
Isn't it funny how the small things can keep archaeologists happy for hours?
Another piece of domestic pot.
But the best way to resolve this site would be to find burials, especially ones we could radiocarbon date. And thankfully, Hilda has a plan.
It was you who wanted us to dig here, wasn't it?
Yes. Well, I wondered whether there might be gravestones in this area. I'm hoping.
John, gravestones and consequently bones?
Possibly. Look, there's the bank. You can see it clearly in the high resistance. If you use the radar, what you can see is the red reflections here. Now, they suggest more substantial stonework surviving. The problem is we don't know whether it's a grave slab or whether it's just an igneous boulder.
So trench 3 goes in over the bank of the enclosure and hopefully a burial. And if, just if, it gives us a 6th or 7th century date, then we could be at the heart of one of the most important periods of British history, the arrival of Christianity.
You watch this because you won't see me on a computer very often, right? Oops, hang on, wait a minute. Oh, no, there we are.
And I can't remember the last time I've seen Mick so excited about the potential of a site or its location in the UK.
Mull is part of an area called Dalriata, which is actually an Irish kingdom which is centred in Northern Ireland. It belongs to the same kingdom as much of Antrim does. So it's like a sort of colony from there, and that's why a lot of the features about this building up here, whether it's a chapel or not, look to me like stuff I've seen in Ireland. And of course they're Christian, they bring Christianity in. And if we turn this round, you see, in the middle of this is Iona, there off the end of Mull, which is Columba's great monastery, and Columba was the great saint for this area. He died in 597, and he was sending his monks out to all these islands you can see. And that influence spreads not only all up the west coast, but also through the Great Glen, across into the area of the Picts further over.
It's funny, isn't it? We tend to think of the Isle of Mull as being so far away from everywhere. You see it on that map, and bang, it suddenly appears to be in the centre of the universe.
And being at the centre of a busy island network could explain why our site seems to have archaeology spanning some 4,000 years.
Have you had anything out of it?
That little bit of flint.
Well, I mean, this definitely shows we've got prehistoric activity up here. People living here, what, thousands of years ago, probably.
Although over in Trench 2, it now looks like the prehistoric stone we found this morning is basically a stray. It hasn't anything to do with the square structure, which we're still no closer to identifying. But back at Trench 1, Mick thinks there's mounting evidence that we're uncovering something significant.
I think I can see a straight line across there, and then where you are, Faye, it seems to turn and go along in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, you're entirely right. We've got a line going down here, another line along here, and then up there, we've almost got this platform coming in.
We see that you say platform, and I think that's exactly right. It's one of these squarish platforms that again you get on chapel sites called lochts, which are like outdoor altars or shrines, or sometimes there are burials in them, and they're often square like that, sometimes with a cross or something in the middle.
Yeah.
But again, it reinforces that idea that we could be dealing with a chapel. We've got a couple of features that should go with that.
It's almost the end of day one, and it's now becoming clear that in spite of finding more medieval pot, we may be on the verge of revealing a fascinating piece of archaeology.
The exciting news is that we think we might be approaching a floor level. And what is really interesting is that you remember that right up there was where we had that medieval pottery.
Yeah.
So in other words, if we've got the floor there and then a build-up of soil and the medieval pottery on the top of that, that floor potentially has got to be so much earlier.
What sort of date could it be?
Well, I mean, it could be any time from, say, the 6th century, if it's to do with Columba or his monks, right the way through to 1200, something like that.
So how do we find out?
I think the only way on a site like this is to get some bone so we can get a radiocarbon date from it. That's the only way.
But if we can't get bone from where Jack is digging over on the perimeter, where would we get that from?
Well, I think our best bet is going to be this lock structure, this rectangular structure off the end. Sometimes they have bone associated with them. But the point is, they're really rare structures. So it'll be a fantastic opportunity to examine one.
So tomorrow we're going to dig one of the most enigmatic and rare pieces of early Christian archaeology that we've ever excavated.
Yep.
And I don't think I've ever said that before on Time Team.
You said it beautifully.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it.
Beginning of day two here on the Isle of Mull, where we're looking for a possible early chapel, and we're all leaving our hotels right now to wend our way up to the site. But the big talk last night in the bar, or to be honest in the bars, was about what Mick calls a locht, which is basically a little stone box at the east end of the chapel which could contain all sorts of early Christian artefacts. Some people are even talking about maybe the bones of a saint. It's not often that I hear our archaeologists get so excited about anything. So most of our effort is now concentrated on that potential chapel.
Right, well, so we can start unpicking this then.
And in particular, the box outside its east end.
And then be able to leave him. Oh, well, I don't know, he wobbled. Yeah, he can come then.
This is Mick's locht, an outside altar or shrine.
He seems to be particularly keen on crosses, but you know what Mick's like with crosses.
And perhaps most surprisingly, it's the normally very cautious Professor Aston who's behind the suggestion that it could contain holy bones.
And then I think in other times he was talking about it being like, you know, like a reliquary, so that presumably you have the bones of saints or something. You really ought to ask him about this. Oh, there's another pebble, so.
What was it that people used to put in here, Mick, and why did they do it?
The most common thing is there seem to be offerings by people who visit the sites, usually in the form of little quartz pebbles.
Yeah, Phil's just found another two in the last 30 seconds.
He's found another two, so that's very common. What's actually inside them is a bit more difficult because there haven't been that many excavated, but they're often treated as a saint's burial. So there are bones, not necessarily a whole skeleton, but you know, enough to indicate that somebody or other was here. And it's usually, they're often called somebody's bed.
When you say saint somebody, is this a hermit who was fairly well known on the island?
Very well known locally, but nobody we've ever heard of. Somebody local.
In your wildest fantasy, what would you like to see come out of here?
In my wildest fancy,
yeah.
A piece of early medieval metalwork, bronze or something like that. There would be a book clasp or a bit of jewellery. But I'll settle for a bit of bone we can get a radiocarbon date from.
Well, it's not every day on Time Team that you can honestly say you may discover the bones of a saint, even if they were only known as that locally. And we would certainly seem to have the manpower to do it. Because over in Trench 2, it now looks like we've spent a whole day uncovering an animal enclosure with a little hut attached for the farmer. There's simply no evidence it was ever a walled cemetery. So we can effectively close that trench down. And speaking of possible burials, Trench 3 has so far failed to find any datable evidence that may help us.
You've got stones and stones, and in the middle, I ain't sure whether you've got quite the sort of stony patch here.
So we're focusing on Trench 1, for the moment, because we may be going elsewhere, as Hilda and Bev, who first stumbled on this site, have been honing their archaeological skills over the last year. And they've now investigated this whole hillside, including poking around in the woods. Which, funnily enough, is also one of Stuart's favourite pastimes.
Stuart, I sometimes think you spend your whole life walking away from archaeology. Dig's behind us.
But it looks as though this time it's paid off.
Well, I found this, which you see there's a wall structure here. This is a building, but it's not the only one here because Bev and Hilda have found lots more like this, haven't you, in the woods?
We've found sheilings further up. We've recorded and measured circular and oval-shaped ones just not far from here.
What's a shieling?
A shieling it's like a stone tent. It's a temporary building that a shepherd lives in when he's tending the cattle and sheep which are brought up into the high ground to graze. But what these things tell us is that there is farming activity up on this ridge up here. There's lots of walls all around it. There's all sorts of archaeology on the surface. And at the moment, it's obscured by all these trees.
Absolutely.
But you've got to remember that 1958, this aerial photograph was taken. There's the chapel there. There were no trees up here, so you could see out to the bay. You could see the ridge. We're actually sitting on a promontory. The chapel might have been sitting high for people to see. A farmstead might be clustered around it. We've got to know what it's part of to understand it.
So was there a farming community up here while our potential chapel was in use?
If you come up here, Mick.
Yeah.
Look at this as you come up. Whoop, look at this as you come up.
Without a care for their own personal safety...
Whoa. Oh, dropped my glasses.
Mick and Stuart take their lives in their hands to identify targets that may be of interest in the wood.
We're on that building there. You see, there's the chapel site, possible chapel site there. There's a cairn I've found in between. But then
you've got this crag along the side as well. And we'll look through here.
Yeah, and the whole thing is one long promontory, and so is within a larger enclosure, part of which are these steep crags.
You know, it looks. I'm trying not to think of it as a monastic site, but it looks remarkably like a number of other sites in the Western Isles.
It may seem a long shot, but they're beginning to think our possible chapel is at the centre of a much bigger enclosure.
I think we should come and look at this.
Okay.
And to investigate what's going on, Mick decides we need to put a trench across a structure Stuart's identified, plus at least one more over a roadway and entrance into this newly extended site. I just hope that once the chainsaws have cleared the area, we can find the manpower to dig them, because we're still having problems deciphering the complex archaeology in Trench 1.
Ellen, take a look at that.
Wow. That is truly amazing. You know, this is just about the last place I'd have expected to see this. And it's a medieval silver penny.
Right.
I mean, it's just extraordinary. You can see it's got this cross going from edge to edge. And inside each quarter, it's got 3 pellets. And so I think it's going to be from about 1280 onwards, so late 13th or 14th century. I don't think it's going to be much later than that.
This coin is just the latest and most spectacular example of medieval activity on this site. We've also had 14th century pottery by the trayful, suggesting this was a busy place 700 years ago.
I think there's somebody living here around 1300 who is generating a surplus that they can sell for money. They're doing pretty well, really. It's quite a high-status place to be.
It's a compelling story, and I have to admit I'm a bit nervous about saying this to you as an Englishman, but if this story happened in the southern counties, it would be dead easy to get loads of documents to substantiate it.
Absolutely. We Scottish historians are tremendously jealous of the English historians because they have a far fuller historical record than we do. It's no surprise to me that we've been unable to get hold of any historical documents.
Were you not writing
related
this
to the
stuff
site.
down?
Yeah, we could certainly write, but we're sitting in the middle of an area that experiences a lot of trouble during the 15th, 16th and 17th centuries. Things get destroyed.
And it's not just the documentary history. You can't do landscape archaeology, landscape history in the same way that you can do in England, can you? Because it's like a big rubbing out of evidence in the landscape.
What's the rubber?
Well, it comes with the clearances.
And the clearances are?
Well, this is an event that starts in Scotland around about the mid-18th century and carries through into the 19th century. And basically you're talking a complete change on the landscape. The landlords are trying to extract more money from their estates. And one of the ways they can do this, they think, is shifting the people off the land, so you're replacing people with sheep. So what we're looking at now is very new.
Isn't it funny? Because I had this romantic idea of a Scottish landscape. It was here when St Columba landed, and it's 250 years old.
Yeah.
So with little or no chance of finding historical records, it's impossible to know exactly who was living here in the 14th century. But what we can say is that they made their home by reusing a much earlier structure.
We're back in Pebble Land again.
Because Mick's now confident that Bev and Hilda's chapel-shaped earthwork was indeed originally an early chapel.
Ooh. Oh, there's another one.
Fantastic.
There's another pebble, please.
It's like being on the beach.
But what we really need now are more than just pebbles. We need datable finds to tell us just how early this chapel is. And unfortunately, Trench 3 has proved bereft of burials. So we're going to extend Trench 1 to investigate the area inside the East End, where traditionally the altar and occasionally burials were placed, as well as looking directly outside the chapel's walls, another place where early burials could be found. With just a few hours left of day 2, we're now concentrating all our efforts on working out how early this chapel is. Or so I thought.
Last time we were here, there was just you, me, Bev, Hilda, and a flat forest floor. And yet now, there's a trench here.
And it's all because Stuart and Mick have been refining their theories about this site, and they believe that hidden in these woods are clues to an even more stunning discovery.
What I've done is taken the aerial photograph when there were no trees here, so we got rid of the trees, laid it over a three-dimensional model of the landscape, and look what we've got. Can you see coming around? See this wall coming around here and avoiding the chapel coming down here? But what we've actually got a large enclosure which uses the very steep crags and the flat ground within it to define basically one large unit with the chapel sitting in the middle of it.
So what might the implication of that be, mate?
Well, I can think of a number of sites in Western Scotland that look exactly like that. and well, the other sites are all monasteries.
Oh, you're joking?
No, they're all early medieval monasteries, so this could be another one.
What do you mean early medieval? What kind of date do you think this monastery could be?
Something to do with Columba. He dies in 597, so you're talking about
6th or 7th century?
6th, 7th, 8th century monasteries, yeah.
We came here looking for a chapel. None of us thought we'd find an early monastery, did we?
Discovering a lost monastery from the time of St Columba, the monk who brought Christianity into Britain via Scotland, could be the find of a lifetime. But I'm concerned that Mick's imagination has got the better of him. I mean, this isn't like any monastery I've ever seen.
I can see it ever so clearly in my mind's eye now. You've got the church with the little crossy bit on it, and you've got the cloister, and you've got the refectory.
No. Different sort of monastery.
Ah.
What you're describing there is the typical late medieval plan that you get in Europe and much of England. Comes in after about 1100, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's as you're implying, it's very predictable. You know, you find the church, you know where the cloister is, you find that, you know where the chapter house is. This is not like that. What we're talking about on the western parts of the country, in Ireland and Scotland and so on, before about 1200, is much less regular. You can have churches, more than one, churches, chapels, a dormitory, workshops, farm buildings, you know, all scattered around the site. Makes them much more difficult to deal with.
If we have got a monastery here, that would be really exciting, wouldn't it?
It would be really important, because every time we find one, because they're not predictable, there's no model plan, we learn so much more about them, because there isn't this blueprint to fall back on. But there are a number of features that they should have. Well, I have a sort of checklist in my brain of things to look for, which I'm not going to tell you now.
All right.
I'm not going to tell you now.
But some of them have been ticked off.
Some of them have been ticked off, and there are others we're looking for.
He is a tease. But at the moment, a Columba-era monastery is just an exciting, even nerve-jangling theory. What we'll need is physical proof, although of what, Mick's keeping close to his chest. We'll also have to find reliable dating evidence, or at least something we can get a radiocarbon date from. Basically, what we really need now is something like a tooth.
Oh my goodness me.
Ah.
That does look...
It's on over, it's quite squishy. So.
Yes, that is a human maxillary molar. You can see the cusp's quite worn down. It's an adult, and it really is in quite vile condition. Yeah. Whereabouts did it come from?
Yeah, it was just under the wall there.
You know, if you get burials associated with these chapels, they quite often are right up against the walls. Hang on. Oh, there's another one, look. Is that another one?
Suddenly, at the end of day 2, we now find ourselves on the verge of a major new discovery. But bizarrely, finding burials, the very thing that could prove it, may be the very thing that stops us in our tracks.
There is a bit of a problem, which is that in Scotland, if you find any human remains, even on an archaeological site, you have to phone the police and persuade them and the Procurator Fiscal that you haven't got a crime scene. All right, well, we haven't got a body yet, but Jackie, am I right in saying you've got a tooth?
We've got 3 teeth, in fact.
Have you?
All from the same part of the jaw, which suggests that it came from the in situ remains.
And 3 teeth, consequently,
counts as a body.
As a body. So I'm actually going to have to make this phone call now, aren't I? Because as of now, we've got to shut the entire dig down. Let's hope we can open it again tomorrow.
Join a thriving worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world with more digs and greater access than ever before.
Right, off we go.
It's the beginning of day 3 on the Isle of Mull, and we're chomping at the bit to solve the mystery of the chapel site on the hill, once we actually get there.
One thing I'm not going to miss about this dig is the half-hour yomp up to the top of the hill just to get to the site. It's been raining all night, and this is all really skiddy like an ice rink. Even our caterpillar vehicle is having problems getting up here, but it's worth it when you get to the top, because the archaeology is absolutely fascinating, although there are some problems.
All we've got is the tooth crowns that have survived.
Our dig was suddenly suspended last night when we hit human remains, and our bones specialist Jackie has had to convince the Scottish legal system that we haven't uncovered a potential crime scene.
They've come out from basically almost underneath that wall that we can see there.
Which we think is a medieval chapel wall.
I mean, I know, for instance, it's an adult because the teeth are worn quite flat. Right. And that, again, is suggestive that, you know, it's not a modern case, because you wouldn't get tooth wear like that.
That's what I want
to
hear.
In a modern individual.
Having seen that, would you be happy for us to carry on?
Absolutely. The date that you're talking about, more than happy for you to continue, and thankfully.
So, with the blessing of Mull's finest, we can get on with the job in hand, which is to try and find a date for this early Christian chapel. Unfortunately, the teeth we found last night just outside the chapel are too decomposed to radiocarbon date. But we still live in hope.
We've got our teeth in that very small area underneath the plastic there. We know it's not coming this way.
Yeah.
So I suspect what we're going to get is a sort of east-west burial. Right then, want to roll some large rocks first?
But we also have another and even more stunning story evolving. The team now believe this chapel may have been part of an early monastery set up by the followers of St Columba. And Mick's now opened a number of trenches in the woods, including one over a potential entrance into his theoretical monastic complex. And another over what may be a building.
Well, we definitely have a structure here. We definitely have something substantial, but the only find that we have is a flint flake.
Oh, right. So it might be early Christian, but also might be prehistoric.
In spite of the strain on our resources, Mick's in his element.
We are a long way from London.
Well, that makes you a happy chappy,
We're a long way
dude.
from civilization. All these are contributory factors as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And he's still confident that the small square locht outside the chapel may contain the lovely datable remains of a local saint.
What we haven't considered is what's happening in the middle. And stones like that, look,
Yeah.
are incredibly loose.
Right, so I hope you're going to suggest that it might have had something set up like a post or a stone in the middle.
Or some sort of container, some hollow...
Or some container, yep.
I mean, you were talking about that there would be, like, you could
A
have
shrine
relics
or something.
relics in
Yeah,
there.
that's right, yeah.
Correct.
It is looking archaeologically like the ones that still survive, but, you know, I've never seen one taken apart like this, but it is looking like what you'd expect.
Well, I've never seen one, nor
No,
taken
but
one
you see,
apart.
I think there's an advantage in that because, being brutally honest, you don't know anything about them.
No.
And that's a fantastic advantage, I think, in you doing it.
So basically, where I'm sitting now, we're hoping this is going to be the entranceway to our chapel.
That would be nice.
We understood it that way, didn't we?
Yeah.
But we jabbed the pole down, we couldn't seem to get to the bottom.
When we were first invited here by Hilda and Bev to investigate this site, I don't think any of us could have predicted just what this dig would unearth. But it looks like one of the trenches in the woods may be about to give Mick another thing to tick off his potential monastery list. Over here, we've got what Hilda and Bev originally thought was maybe a shieling, a sheep pen, something like that, although Stuart thought that it might be a bit more complex than that. How are you doing, Raksha?
Well, if you came here this morning, it looked like a big jumble of stones, but we now have something a lot more substantial. We have these absolutely great big socking double skin walls coming through, which doesn't really go with a shieling.
So it's not a shieling or a sheep pen or whatever because it's just there's too much of it.
There's too much of it. It looks rather complex. It's just very strange because it kind of comes round through there, and then we have this other thing coming through just through here, which we think is a cell.
A cell? That sounds monastic, doesn't it? This twin-celled building may not be the final piece of the jigsaw, but it really does look like the sort of simple dwelling used by monks on early monastery sites across the Western Isles. And they all have one thing in common: the influence of the late 6th century monk, Columba. You do realise I've been pinching your book systematically for the last 3 days?
I notice you with your nose deep in a book on Celtic Christianity or something.
That's the kind of guy I am.
Yeah.
What struck me most was that Columba, who lived, 1,500 years ago, if not more, you'd have thought he would be lost in the mists of time, but a real strong character comes across.
Yeah, and we only get that because with some of these saints, somebody fairly soon after they died wrote what's called a life. And in this case, it's a chap called Adomnan, who was the later abbot of Iona. And he clearly spoke to people who knew Columba. So then he puts this life story together. And it's fantastic, the stuff in it.
He was a child prodigy.
Yep.
All the other monks where he was training doted on him. He had a really good education.
Yeah.
He was very tall. He had a very loud voice, which I would have thought would have been very irritating.
I think that'd be very useful dealing with a load of monks on different islands.
And the thing that strikes me so much about Columba is that although, in a sense, he was living this really freezing cold existence in his monk's cell, he was also using his status to go all round Scotland, sorting out problems, getting the whole area unified.
Yeah, we know from the life that he went to various islands, he set up other monasteries on those islands. We know the names of some of them. We suspect there are others we don't know the names of. It's very difficult to locate a lot of them.
But if there was a monastery here, surely we would know about it. Surely it would be in the monks' annals.
Not necessarily. We know that Iona House, probably on Mull, in the later Middle Ages, had a whole series of properties down the north and west side of the island. But whether they were there earlier on, if they are, they're not mentioned. And that's your problem, you see. It's nothing like as easy as down in England.
So with only a few hours left, the race is now on to find a date to link our site with the time of Columba. And we've got a couple of potential targets for burials that might give us that.
It's over here. If we bring the sound in, it sounds quite hollow.
Jackie thinks she's found a couple of hollow-sounding areas outside the chapel that could turn out to be graves. And Matt believes he's just coming onto the floor in front of the altar, a classic place for the chapel's founder to be buried.
There's a distinct line of clay along there. However, that wouldn't stand up, obviously, if it was just built like that.
Right.
And might even be worth just pushing it back a bit, I think.
Personally, I'm amazed that such a potentially crucial early Christian site has completely disappeared from the records. But maybe, just maybe, this site has been commemorated in folk history. It's just no one's noticed until now.
Some people have said that if this was indeed an ancient chapel, there should be a Gallic name for it, which has come down onto the later maps. Now, if you go around and you look for the closest possible place name, we're here, and look, there's this name here. You better read it, Alistair.
Collia Creca Cat, which is the wood of the cliff of the cat. So it may be a reference to a wild cat.
And it's been suggested that this Collie name might possibly have been a kill name instead, because it's very similar.
This is often a problem in Scotland when we're looking for early chapel sites and we have the place name Kill, which we think might be a chapel. But it all depends on what the first surveyors thought they heard when they were speaking to the locals. Was it a kill or was it a coil?
Do you remember when you and I were excavating in the Isle of Man about 3 years ago? We dug a chapel site there, do you remember? And that was called a keel, wasn't it?
It's the same language, essentially, yes, absolutely. But it's what, a kilometre away from our site? And if only we could definitely say that, that this place name belonged to this place, then I think we'd have our name.
It's a tempting theory that someone simply misunderstood the local Gaelic pronunciation of chapel. And maybe we do have a name for the site. But that's all on hold now, because we may just have hit burials at the chapel.
It's possible. You know, I said that I thought there was going to be another of these features this way, with a very narrow gap between. Well, that soil there is also very soft.
So you think there's another grave that side?
So there might be something else that side. So we might have a kind of line of these features.
Oh, well, that's just what you get outside these chapels in the north, isn't it? I mean, they're so closely packed up against the church or chapel walls, there's no space between them.
No.
Helen? Tony, do you want to come over here?
Yeah?
Oh, crikey.
What have you got?
Have you got something else?
You won't believe what I got here.
See what we get.
It's cleaning here under the altar area.
Yeah.
You can see this cut there.
Yeah.
There's a void in there. Do you want to just jump in here, Tony?
That's all right.
Yeah, get in there. It's very difficult to see, but that's the void there. Can you see, if you look down, right down in that hole, the one at this end of the cut.
The altar.
Oh,
grave, right.
What's that in there?
That white stuff in there.
Yeah.
I think that's bone. I mean, it's pretty degraded like the other stuff,
Yeah.
but
They're coming up thick and fast now, aren't they?
Yeah, but look
you know
where
who
that is. And it's under where the altar would be, isn't it?
That's the most important place. That's the founder. That's the chap whose kill it is.
Look where it is, right at the east end.
Oh, fantastic. What a find.
That is just stupendous.
Matt has just uncovered the grave of someone so important that they may well have been regarded as a local saint. And the news just gets better on this phenomenal site. This tiny amount of bone was enough to give a radiocarbon date of the early 7th century, within 1 or 2 generations of Columba. It would seem that we're amongst the remains of one of the earliest chapels in Britain.
I think we finally understand what we've got here. It's one of these things called a loct, which is like an outside altar come shrine. It ought to have a cross or something marking it. Phil, I reckon as you've now got that, I think, that slot in the middle.
Absolutely, Mick. I mean, and you can see here, look at the way these stones are all in a line, stacked up.
Oh, straight, yeah.
That is probably where the cross would have stood.
Yeah.
It's a stunning discovery, but what's almost unbelievable is what happened next. With the last scrape of the day, we found this. Hidden in plain sight amongst the hundreds of stones we've been examining for 3 days is a part of the original Celtic cross that would have stood proud outside the eastern end of this chapel. But the chapel didn't just stand here in splendid isolation. We now believe it was at the heart of a small 7th century monastic site which must have been founded by the monks based at St Columba's Iona monastery. It's a find that will enter the history books. And we even think we can give a name to this monastery.
Tony, you remember I was saying that one of the problems of identifying this site as that of a chapel was that we didn't have the Gaelic place name that should have come down in folklore.
I know, it's so frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, and Alistair had that theory that what was marked on the map as Collie Craggercate could have been a corruption of Kill Craggercate.
What do we think the name means?
Well, Craigercat means Cliff of the Cats, and we're on a cliff, so it would be church at the Cliff of the Cats. Now, if we were looking for the name of the person who might be buried here, we haven't got it yet, but looking at Craigercat might be a very good place to start.
And what's so frustrating is that if some 18th century bureaucrat had known the Gaelic and had written this all down properly, then we could have solved this mystery a day and a half ago.
Except I don't think we would have had it to solve. I think somebody else would have come here before now. That mystery is what's preserved it for us.
Bev, 3 days ago I asked you what you'd like us to find. Can you remember what you said?
I'd like you to find the floor, please.
Well, we certainly found you the floor. We found you what's underneath the floor. And can you remember, Hilda, what you wanted?
I wanted to find some bones.
And we've got bones aplenty, haven't we? That may well be the skull of the man who originally founded this chapel over 1,500 years ago.
Fantastic.
So
Fantastic.
We've got you a chapel, we've got you a monastery, and we may well have got you the bones of a saint.
Unbelievable.
Just absolutely.
The perfect time team. Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses, and behind-the-scenes insights.